there's a sign hanging up against the wall in the tavern. Then, in 1908, we have, of course, the pamphlet that I already talked about, written by Sara Taft. And on the third paragraph of that pamphlet, she talks in detail about the sign. It says, he bought the farm of Samuel Reed, Jr., the deed of conveyance during the date of July 20th, 1774. At that time, there was a small house situated easterly from the present one, which must have been built the present one, which must have been built between 1774 and 1778, as the sign still preserved bears the latter date. The sign bears a representation of the American eagle with 13 stars and bars, the name S. Taft and the date of 1778. This hung over the road, suspended on an iron rod that went from a branch of one of the buttonwood trees to a building upon the opposite side of the road called the Corn Barn. So I think a sycamore tree is a buttonwood tree, I think. That's what they called them back then. So that's 1908. And then, in 1910, there's an article, actually my brother, is my brother here? My brother John. He sent me this article, but actually it was posted earlier by Tom, I just didn't notice it. There was an article in the New York Times from 1910 talking about President William Howard Taft's visit to Uxbridge. And what happened was Taft was vacationing somewhere on the North Shore, and then Governor Draper, who lived in Hopedale, invited him. This is a picture of them sitting on the governor's front porch in Hopedale. They invited Taft to come out and spend the night. And while Taft was here, he toured Mendon and he toured Uxbridge. Now Taft had been here several times before. His father, get the names right. So his grandfather was from Uxbridge. His grandfather left Uxbridge with his family when he was 14 years old. He lived in a house on off of Hazel Street. It's still there. It's on the National Register of Historic Places. You really can't see it because it's way, way up the back. You can catch a glimpse of it when the leaves are down. And I don't dare drive up the driveway, so I really never seen it. And just pictures of it. And he left town when he was 14, his grandfather, and they moved to Vermont. And then President Taft's father was born, Alfonso Taft, and he moved to Ohio. And that's where William Howard Taft was born. Alfonso Taft served as the Secretary of War and the U.S. Attorney General under Ulysses S. President Grant. And so he would come, Alfonso Taft came to at least two Taft family gatherings in Uxbridge as a keynote speaker. Now those gatherings were always held where St. Mary's Church is now. So the rectory was a Taft house. They would have this big tent and picnic, basically where St. Mary's is now. And he was the keynote speaker. Taft came twice as a kid when his father was making these speeches. And he came with his brother. Taft's brother was the founder of the Chicago Cubs baseball team. And then Taft came another time. Taft, what's the name of the historical house in Millbury? The big mansion that was right. So that was Taft's aunt owned that. And he did a whistle stop in Uxbridge on his way to go there one time, and he snuck back to Uxbridge to go look at his grandfather's old house. So I think this was Taft's fourth and last visit to Uxbridge. But the article reads, he came to Uxbridge, Taft where Washington State. The President, Taft, next drove to North Uxbridge through more beautiful scenery and past fruit-laden orchards to the residence of Miss Sara Taft. Her house is the site of the tavern where Washington finally found supper and lodging. The house is well preserved. It was kept by Samuel Taft. The sign that swung from the adjacent tree was brought forth for his inspection. It was made in 1787 and bore an excellent representation of an eagle. Rats gnawed it slightly during the years that it reposed in an adjacent corn barn. Mrs. Taft invited the president into the house and showed him the apartment that Washington occupied. And he was departing, she entertained him with a ghost story of a military funeral which a relative some generations ago thought they saw passing. So that account of that ghost funeral is in that pamphlet that she wrote 4 years before. Then in 1928, there's a reference to 1928 on Digital Commonwealth. Tom posted this a couple of years ago, and I found this. And it's got a picture of the back and the side of the Taft Tavern, which you don't often see that picture. And in the text, this is written. It says, Samuel Taft, the farmer, is believed to have built the present house in 1774 or no later than 1778. The second date is based on the painter's sign for Taft's Tavern bearing the date 1778, which remained in the possession of his descendants at least as late as 1928. So that's why I have 1928 up there as a reference. And then, of course, I already talked about the 250th anniversary commemorative book, where they say they saw the sign a couple of years before, which would be 75, in a antique shop for sale for $3,500. So that's 75. And then Tom just gave me this a couple of days ago, and he just posted it today on his website. It's an article from the real estate section of the Evening Gazette from Friday, July 1st, 1988, and talks about some new owners of the Taft Tavern. Tom and Mary Ann Petrusky have, for the last couple of years, been taking the best care of the Taft Tavern on Sutton Street, made it better. They brought back the patina and made the house special over the many years since George Washington did indeed sleep there. And that little in the, where am I pointing there? Right there, that's a blow up right there. A replica of the original sign marks the tavern. The Petruskis decided to leave the original, which they saw selling for $8,000 in the antique shop. So they took a picture of it and they made a replica. And guess what walked in the door today? Mrs. Black brought and donated to the Historical Society the replica that we're looking at right there. That was really something. I liked it. Put it right in the light. There you go. Yeah. The only difference from the other one is it doesn't have the S right here. Otherwise, yeah. Well, you see the picture. Isn't that something?
I have the photo.
What's that?
I also have the photo.
Oh, you have a photo?
Yeah.
Oh,
I don't know if this is of the replica or the original, but.
Oh, bring it on up,
Yeah.
Jim. You'll do it. So that's our 1988 reference to the sign. And then, this is part of what led to me finding it, but we'll just talk about it as a reference right now. In November 19th, 2023, the sign was on a online auction site called Invaluable, and the sign sold for $13,000 on November 19th, 2023. And I did some digging on this, and it was consigned to the online auction house by an auction house in Westchester County, New York, called Butterscotch Auctioneers and Appraisers. And also, if you're digging deep into this posting, they say, it was listed also on the Butterscotch website, and they have the properties written right there. It's blown up there. The old Taft Tavern in Uxbridge was built by Samuel Taft, and George Washington was his overnight guest there in 1789. Northeast Auctions in August 1999 sold this, and Sotheby's sold it in 2007. And this time here, it was put up to auction in 2023 by part of a collection of a prominent Fifth Avenue doctor in New York City. So that's where it was. He must have bought it from Sotheby's in 2007 and put it up for auction in 2023. So this sign's been around the block, right? So first, Northeast Auctions, 99, Sotheby's in 2007. So here's kind of a rundown of what I've been able to find where the sign has been. You got the scrapbook from 1904 that's in the possession of the Historical Society. 1906, you got Sara Taft's pamphlet, The Old Taft Tavern, where it's mentioned in the third paragraph. 1910, you got the New York Times article. 1928, we have a Digital Commonwealth that talks about the Taft holding it up until 1928. 75, it's seen in an antique shop for sale for $3,500. And 88, it's seen in an antique shop for $8,000. And 99, sold by Northeast Auctions. 2007, sold by Sotheby's. 2023, owned by the prominent Fifth Avenue lawyer and sold at an online auction for $13,000. And in 2025, owned by a collector in Columbus, Ohio, and sold to the Uxbridge Historical Society.
Not much.
So we come to the last section of my talk. Sherlock Holmes in the case of the missing Taft Tavern Inn. So we always talk about this book again, the commemorative book, which I love to go through, and this thing, it always drove me crazy. And don't you know, I don't know why, I picked up the book this October, I'm sitting there reading the book, and I came to this page again. Son of a gun, and we got the farmhouse almost done. This belongs in the farmhouse. And so I just downloaded a new app. It's an AI search engine, and lo and behold, up comes this posting. Now, I'm not the first one that found it, it turns out, saw that, but again, it was listed on Invaluable online auction site, but it was consigned to that site by other Scotch auctioneers and appraisers. So I said, wow, I can't believe I found this. How fortunate, right? And I slept on it, went to bed. Woke up in the morning, waited till 9 o'clock, and I called Brother Scotch, and I left the voicemail. And I told him the whole sob story. Geez, you know, we got the bed, the house is still standing, we're going to be celebrating our 250th anniversary of the nation, the 300th anniversary of Uxbridge the year after. We're just fixing up the museum. I want to find out where this is. And I know you sold it 2 years before, but maybe you can send me in the direction of the person that bought it. And, you know, I didn't think I would hear from them. Why would they bother getting back to me for something they sold 2 years before? But then, later in the morning, at 11 o'clock, I get a phone call. And he goes, hi, you were inquiring about the Taft Tavern sign. And I said, yes, I am, about the blah, 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 going through it again. And he goes, oh, no, you're misunderstanding. I'm not the auctioneer. I'm the guy that owns it. I'm in Columbus, Ohio. And I collect all kinds of early American, high-end early American stuff. And I own it. So we talked. He was a really nice guy. And I told him my whole story over again. And he was really interested. He was asking questions and everything. And he ended it well. Obviously, the sign belongs in Uxbridge. He says, after all, we're just temporary keepers of this stuff. And he goes, it's going to cost you. I love this sign. I collect a lot of stuff and it has the most prominent location in my house. I have been looking for a colonial pub sign for a long time. I knew about this sign before it went up to auction. You know, serious collectors know about this sign. And he says, so you're gonna have, I want you to think about what you want to pay for it, call me back and make an offer. And then he sent me the picture of it hanging over this really nice, like 1740, we call it was made in New York City, and everything, I mean, this whole house is filled with, like, if you had, the early American section of the Boston Museum of Fine Arts, that's what his collection was like all pristine stuff. And that sign was front and center. So I was so excited that we found the sign, right? We gotta get this at all costs. So I got on the phone right away. I think I texted Mike, I called him, and I was all excited. Big news.
Bank accounts, you can go buy this stuff.
And I started writing emails to Mike after. I said, I hope this is blah, blah, blah. I asked him if he had any more. I was wondering myself, is this the real sign? Or is this a phony? You know what I mean? And so I'm feeling him out. Do you have anything, any documentation that goes with the sign? He goes, I don't, but we know that, it was talked about, the story was in the auction house website that it was part of, and I knew about the sign beforehand. And he goes, if it doesn't work for you, I understand. I really don't want to sell it. And I sent him some stuff that I had. I said, you probably have this stuff. And but I said, in order to raise the funds, I need to determine price. I would like to offer this for it. I offered a couple of grand, 15 grand. You could have it together. And he said, oh, no. He said, thanks for the pictures. I'm sorry, but as a dealer, I need to make a fair profit. After purchasing my expenses, I won't accept anything less than this for the sign. Then he sent me a reminder. He had already told me this. I should know that I turned down this much offer. So he was offered to sell it to us for, supposedly he had a previous offer. And, I hadn't met the guy yet. I believe him now, but I wasn't sure I was believing him then. He was giving me a pitch. Said, thanks for the number, Mike. A group of people are working on raising the money. I will stay in touch. Says, thanks, Dave. It's not going anywhere. So we went to a meeting of the board of directors of the Historical Society. Just happened to have a meeting scheduled for the 14th, and we went there, and I told everybody about it. And a couple of very generous people stepped up to donate the money towards the sign, and this is the applause line. So I said, Mike, I hope this finds you well. There's a tremendous excitement in Uxbridge community about bringing the historic Taft sign back home. I'm thrilled to report I have the full blank ready to complete the purchase. And I made arrangements to bring a certified bank check to his house. Either I was going to pick up the sign with my brother, and we were going to do a road trip together. And we went up. I proposed the 7th or 21st of October, and he said the 7th worked, and he said it certainly was great being the caretaker of this the past couple of years, but he was happy to see that it was going home to Uxbridge. And so I made a crate to go in the back of my wife's SUV, and a couple of weeks later, my brother and I got in my wife's car and we drove 700. First we stopped in, what was the name? Just outside of Akron, went the other side of Akron, Ohio, and then we went on to Columbus the next day, and we met him at his house. And this is me outside of his house. Now, he lived in the section right downtown Columbus, Ohio. It was sort of like we had Beacon Hill. It's called Germantown. All red brick houses. That house is red brick painted gray. Red brick sidewalks, red brick streets. I mean, you're talking blocks and blocks, right in the shadow of the high rises. So it's sort of like their Beacon Hill, and beautiful home. And we went in, and I got to see the sign. My brother took this picture. That sideboard, I probably shouldn't have silver goblets made in the 1700s. One was from New Hampshire, the other one was from Rhode Island. The place was full of antiques. My brother took the sign off the wall, and it's heavier than you think. Here's one of the pieces he had, a Willard clock from the 1700s, pristine condition, working, all the paperwork made right in Grafton. It's one of his prized possessions. But he had all kinds of, like, it was like a museum. The house was a museum where people come to see him. Oh, really? Like, machines going crazy there. So that's me packing away. My brother said I was shaking. I was so excited. And then we're on the road back. And we drove from Columbus, Ohio. We drove out to the middle of Pennsylvania somewhere. And then the next day we drove back to, I dropped my brother off in Pasco. And then I came back to Uxbridge myself, but I had to drive the car to Mrs. Black's Taft Tavern just to say, touchdown. That's the story. It's been sitting in my house since, what was that, October 9th? And here's the sun, right here. The rat marks right here. It's really a beautiful piece. There's a back side to it too, but the back is a lot more faded than this is. And it's just going to be a beautiful place. They already have a spot picked out for it at the John Fine House. So thank you very much, everybody.